All right, like they said, I am Jesse Lucas. I'm a teacher at Pikeville High School, and my project was called Missions on Mars. So what I did in my honors Earth and Space classes, I used the money to buy Lego robotics. There's a couple of pictures right there, and I designed an engineering challenge for them. So they had to go through, and this was actually their final for the first semester, getting through this engineering challenge. So I put my problems and practices back on. So really my question was, can the engineering design process help students gain problem-solving skills needed in today's world? Everything is moving really towards problem-solving skills. You need it in any facet of life. So that's what I've really tried to aim to do in it. So the goal for the whole project was allow students to look at a course. So I had a course that was on Mars, and they would have to draw a map and then make decisions as a team to get to the end of the course, pick up a rock on Mars, and bring it back to their home base. So the skills needed for it, and the skills that I was really looking for, problem-solving skills. So I had to design and redesign, and they had to design and redesign, and you'll see it here in just a minute, but the course, I actually made multiple different paths, so they got to choose which path and which rock they picked up on Mars. So they had to design a robot depending on the path as well. Technology skills, so they had to use computers, they had to do programming, we'll talk about it a little bit later, and they had to learn a little bit of circuitry as well. And one that I didn't anticipate that played a huge role in it was the team building skills, the group dynamics and the roles that they kind of filled. So for the research on my project, it was mostly qualitative data. I didn't get a lot of hard numbers. It was more or less just me kind of watching and then looking how they grew throughout the semester. So I used an engineering notebook. The engineering notebook was designed they would get kind of like a diary or a journal where they would design it, they would split it up into the design process, programming, and just general notes, and they would just kind of tell me what they did on a day-to-day basis, so I know they didn't do nothing that day. A lot of active monitoring. They did have a post-survey that we'll talk about later, and some engineering challenges afterwards. So on the very first day of the activity, what I did, I just posted a Google Doc on their Schoology. We read aloud kind of the mission. They had 2.5 weeks to do it. I let them form the teams however they wanted. We made sure that we understood the goals of the mission. We began our engineering notebook, and then they started to figure out what design they wanted for their robots. So I posted a link to multiple designs on Lego's website, and I kind of made it pretty open. I said you can use whatever design you want. You can make it yourself. You can completely copy a design. It's all up to them. So the design process, the early designs, here's a couple pictures of my students while they were trying to build them. The early designs, it was actually pretty funny. A lot of the groups, I'd say a third of the groups actually ended up picking a gorilla on the first day, and then when they started building it, they realized, hey, this gorilla doesn't have wheels, it can't move, it can't pick up a rock. So they had to basically scrap after day one. So a lot of the groups figured out pretty quickly, hey, I've got to actually think about what I'm doing in the future. I can't just do what's cool. I also had a group that tried to do a turtle. Turtle wouldn't move either. So they tried to do a tank. A lot of groups ended up doing a bucket or a scoop, or some groups just decided to do a claw. Actually, by the end of it, though, most groups realized that the tank wouldn't work. They had to make either a bucket or a scoop or a claw, or kind of a mixture of both, where they would have a bucket and then the claw would close on the bucket. So for the programming aspect, we did it in Robot C. It's kind of an elementary drag and drop coding, so it wasn't super difficult. The group dynamics was pretty funny. In the main beginning, a lot of students were very intimidated by the programming because it's thought as a very difficult thing. So they would normally just say, hey, this one person's going to program by the end, but I made sure that didn't happen. I made sure everybody figured out how to program by the end. And it was really cool breaking down the code where they would see there's different powers that you could set the motors to. They would start measuring the wheels, and they would do like one rotation of the wheel. They knew exactly how far it would go, how much a 90-degree turn would be, and then redesigning based off of their programming. So they realized pretty quickly that their programming once they started programming and the robots started moving, that their designs were not going to work. So here's a couple of videos of, let's see. Yeah, here's a video of one random day. So this was their first. Yeah, so actually when people tried to start doing it, everybody in the class kind of gathered around and everyone was really excited. You could hear kids in the background being like, oh my God, they almost made it. And that was actually at the end of the day, and this one was at the beginning of the day. So this is just one day how they changed their code, because at the beginning, this is the same group. So it took a lot of programming, reprogramming, designing, redesigning, which is all engineering really is. It's basically just, you see a problem, you keep trying to fix it. So they had a whole lot of fun with it. Oh, it's going again. So the post survey, I would ask kind of thought-provoking questions. And one of the questions I said, did you feel like your critical thinking skills evolved during the challenge? And here's just a couple random ones. They said, yes, this made me realize that the instructions are there to guide, but not to follow word for word like we had to remove pieces along the way, like small Legos we didn't need, and also adapt to the things like building the scoop off of no instructions. So that's one example of just one of the questions. Here's another one. If I gave you a new challenge, how would you approach the problem solving, or the problems needed solved? One of the students said evaluate all the steps in the challenge, then solve them one by one, all the while keeping in mind how they will affect one another. So their designing, their planning got overwhelmingly better. And then the last project that I did in my class, I had a project after we learned about earthquakes. We had to try and build an earthquake-proof structure. I did this for my honors classes and my general classes, so I kind of had like a control group as well. The first two classes that did the Lego robotics, those were my honors classes, they made a plan. They were not very discouraged every time the plan didn't work because they are already used to it not working and redesigning. Much quicker at responses. They were just throwing darts at the wall in their group and hoping one sticked, and the teamwork was overwhelmingly better. The three classes that didn't, they were very fast moving from the beginning. They didn't have much of a plan. They were just kind of building as they went. And when it didn't work, they got extremely discouraged. So I had to kind of talk up my general classes. They had very slow responses when something didn't work, and their teamwork was not the best because they didn't realize how to respond in those situations. Perfect. I still had 5 seconds. So that was my project. I'm hoping next year to do something similar, just take it one step further and build at least a better course where they'll have to go up and down ramps and maybe get a couple more robots. But yep, that's it. Any questions? Deal.
Thank you.